Hi, I'm Paul.
And I'm Tiffany.
To some, we could be called career wizards.
And to others, sometimes we seem like therapists. However, we definitely are not.
But for you, we are the co-hosts of the Career Boosters podcast.
I think one thing, and I was reading this in a Business Insider article, is HR professionals reporting that they're seeing 3 times more resumes and applications than they did 3 or 4 years ago. It is just that much easier to apply to positions due to social media, due to things like the easy apply button on LinkedIn. And so these are things that are overloading their HR departments. And again, that's where the importance of making sure your resume and cover letter hit everything that they're looking for.
Hello, and welcome to the Career Boosters podcast. Today, we have our very first repeat guest, Chandler Holyoak, who is the Employer Relations and Community Partner Outreach Specialist for the Careers and Work Integrated Learning Team at the Alberta School of Business and the University of Alberta. I think I got that all through one breath. I was practicing that before we started. So, Chandler, thank you so much for joining us. Season 2, episode 19 was our first repeat guest, which is amazing. And we thought there would be no better person to come in and talk about resumes and cover letters than Chandler. The topic of conversation today is resumes and cover letters, and the reason we're having Chandler is he not only works with students and employers around careers. Chandler was also in human resources before he came here with a big construction company here in Edmonton. So this topic is very important at this point because we still use these to find jobs, resumes, and cover letters. So we are going to dive right in because there's lots of information that we want to get through. I know when we did this class, Chandler, this week, it was, oh my gosh, it was Tiffany and Paul talking for, 90 minutes straight, pretty much. And there's so much to go through with these. So we have a ton of questions. So we're going to dive right in. So Chandler, we've had you on the show already. So if you can, but we get to see your face now, which is awesome. And the nice hair. I'm very jealous of the nice hair. So if you can start by telling us who you are, what you've done, and a little bit about yourself and your background.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. And thank you again, both of you, for having me on a second time where you get to see my face. It's a lot of fun the first time, so happy to do it again. As you said, Paul, I work in the Careers and Work Integrated Learning Office with a really long title. I primarily work with employers on getting them engaged and involved here at the Alberta School of Business, whether that's hiring, whether that's events, classroom speaking, you name it. I'm your first go-to guy for that. But as you mentioned, I have a degree in HR management from the Alberta School of Business. I graduated back in 2019. So I went out into industry. I worked for about 4 years as an HR professional, both as a coordinator, all working my way up to a generalist. Then I came and joined the school, which was great. Has been a very nice transition into that business development, external relations, but I did learn a lot while I was out in industry as an HR professional. And just a little bit about myself. One very exciting tidbit is I'm going to be a dad in a month. I'm having my first child here in the middle of February, so very much looking forward to that and the new challenges that come with that. So a little bit about me.
And one of those big life events that you don't submit a resume or cover letter for. Can you imagine what that would look like, submitting a cover letter and a resume to be a dad?
Yeah.
It's a whole yeah, okay. Chandler, it's when we were thinking about who would add value to this type of topic and conversation from a different lens that is both familiar for students, but also a different perspective. You were top of the list. And what I think each and every one of us offer is kind of legs or feet in 2 different worlds. And you and I have had a foot kind of in a similar world from an HR perspective, but different industry and different experience. And you and I can kind of prove that HR hiring from just person to person, company to company can be so different, which is often super frustrating from a candidate perspective. But all 3 of us also have a foot in just the world of supporting students. And so to blend those 2 together, I think is really powerful for the 3 of us to just both talk about what we're aligned in, what we know that is the same, and actually how we differ, which truly proves that hiring is a bit of a crapshoot is what I call it. There's some best practices, but goodness gracious, it's a human bias filled process. So for us to offer our own kind of experience. So tell us, what is your experience with resumes and cover letters? Talk about industry, talk about types of roles, just how have you interacted with this?
So as I mentioned, I worked in construction, particularly for 4 years. I don't know why. It's just where I ended up. And then when you have construction on your resume, you get hired at a lot of other construction companies. So I worked for PCL Construction. I worked for a little electrical contracting company called A Circuit Electric. I worked for Keller Construction, the longest, which specialized in building gas stations. So I was hiring anything under the sun when it came to skilled labor, carpenters, superintendents, project managers, project coordinators, accountants, uh, yeah, just anything construction related under the sun. It was a very wide variety. And it's interesting when you look at some of those positions and compare them. You know, the skilled laborer who works on the ground using their hands, swinging a hammer, versus a project manager who is at the desk, typing away, putting together quotes and POs and all these kinds of more technical things. Their resumes are very different. So analyzing one versus the other always took a special eye where I, as an HR professional, I very rarely have ever swung a hammer or done anything like that, where I needed to lean on other people's expertise to make sure that I was hiring the right candidate. One of the things I enjoyed most about the recruitment process as a whole was that end result, that finding that right fit who just makes everybody's lives a little bit easier within the company. We were able to find a lot of really quality people. But then the not so fun thing about it is the other side of where you have to reject the people who may not have just been the right fit, or they were really good, but you're only hiring one person. Those people and the communication of rejection and how to improve and giving those, hey, this is how you could have improved or done better next time. It was great, but it also just kind of hurt a little bit. It's kind of that mindset you have to get into where there's the good and the bad, and you got to take it both. So
Yeah, and Chandler, it's really interesting that you talk about, from a carpenter all the way up into like a project manager or a superintendent and these variety of roles. I also was a recruiter in for many, many years. And I remember starting off with roles like that were emptying porta potties in Fort McMurray. Like good luck trying to find that. Thank God I've never had to do anything like that. But, there are people that are really great at that. And so you have to learn how to find those people. You have to learn how to do those things. And then as my own career progressed, I got into more of the senior leadership and things like that. And they're all so different. And that's what's so unique and interesting about the world of recruitment. I love how you talked about the likes and dislikes because I think we all three can share all of those. There's nothing better than helping people, make the next step in their career journey. So what were some of the best practices you followed when it came to HR recruitment? And how have you seen any of those shift as you've continued your career?
for sure. So I think it starts with, especially as an HR professional, the job description and having something that is well and clearly defined for the candidate. Ultimately, you don't want them starting the job, and it has nothing to do with what they read online on Indeed or Glassdoor or LinkedIn. You want to make sure that it is clearly communicated both throughout the interview process as well as at that initial job description. So that I think is something that a lot of employers need to focus on and put an ample amount of time in, because otherwise there's a miscommunication and level of expectation. Another thing is just that level of communication. Best practice says you should be communicating with the candidates often and, again, clearly and concisely, because as we all know nowadays, there's a lot of ghosting that goes on out there, and we want to make sure that we treat these candidates with respect and dignity, because these are people at the end of the day. And I know that with some organizations, there are a lot of people who apply, but just to get that email that says, sorry, you're not the right fit, goes a long way in putting their mind at ease and making sure the process goes a lot more smoothly. As much as a rejection email sucks, you're probably going to look more fondly on the company that sends you the rejection letter versus the company that just ghosts you and doesn't say anything at all. And so with the implementation of technology and AI, we've seen a bit more of a shift in terms of communication of that standard boilerplate, it sounds like you're talking to a computer, but in my opinion, I think that does help at least close the loop. gives people closure in terms of that role that they're trying to achieve or to gain. Um, yeah, it's tough out there right now in the job market. So any improved levels of communication, I think, is always best.
I want to link that back to something that you said kind of in your opening, talking about feedback. And so, a common question that Paul and I get, or I certainly know I get, and I would imagine Paul does too, is, when people receive that rejection or get ghosted, but usually when they're told you weren't, the candidate, they're like, well, can I ask for feedback? What should I do? And my
Hmm.
recommendation is always to at least ask, but ask from a growth mindset perspective, not from a why didn't I get the job perspective. It's, what can I do to improve as I continue to look for jobs? Now, I'm curious to know how you handled that question because my how I talk to students about this is, they may not give you anything, and then you're no worse off, right? Or they might give you a nugget that might be helpful. And I used to. It wouldn't be for everybody, but if there was a skill set I could offer them, if I could tell them how to do a star response better, or give them something to Google, I would in most cases. What about you?
For sure. I think that's, as HR professionals, that's part of our responsibility at the end of the day. I know that there's no obligation for us to do it, but it's beneficial for both the candidate and you as the recruiter to maybe get that candidate back. Maybe they were missing one or two things that would have made them perfect. For you to give them that one note to say, hey, this could have been improved. This is kind of where you fell flat is huge. I myself only gave it, when it was one of those relationships that had developed to a point where I was like, okay, I feel comfortable telling this person this information. And I wouldn't go in depth because then they start prying a little bit more and asking for more. And you just kind of want to leave it at, here's the thing. That's the thing. It's a difficult tightrope to walk kind of as an HR professional because obviously you're there to have the company's best interests at heart. But again, you're a human being. You appreciate and respect these candidates that are out there trying to find the right fit for them and to help them in any way is just, something that we all want to kind of at the end of the day do.
So, bottom line, ask from a
Ask. Oh,
place of
100%.
growth. And if they don't offer anything, no harm, no foul. And if they
Yeah.
do, great.
Yeah.
Tell us about this. So we talk about resumes right now. Getting the current stat is like 7.4 seconds in initial review, and it's getting shorter and shorter as recruiters have hundreds and hundreds of more candidates to go through. So, how would somebody instantly land in your yes pile or instantly land in your no pile within that first less than 10 seconds?
For sure. So, one of the first things I look for is, does it look neat and tidy? Like if it looks disorganized by any sense of the imagination, I'm not going to read it because I assume that the rest of it is reading it is going to be disorganized. So that's right off the bat is having a clearly, nicely structured resume where everything is in the right place when it comes to work experience, education, uh, your little blurb about even where you live, your phone number, how to contact you. Those kinds of things are very, very important. And then making sure that there are words that correlate with what is asked for in the job description. So if there's a specific technology that is asked for, you need a certain amount of years of experience to get this job. You better have that in your resume somewhere where it's easy to see. Same with job title. So let's say you're going from a project manager to a senior project manager job, and that's a requirement of the job description. I then look for to see if you have 5 years of project management experience or a minimum number of years that we have outlined. That is going to get you moved on way faster than everybody else. Again, like you said, Tiffany, we're looking 5 to 10 seconds because when you're looking through 100 resume to be able to shortlist 20 of them based on hitting those minimal criteria. Um, Again, it is all based on the job description because we assume that the job description was created to make sure that we are getting the exact right candidate with the right skill set, with the right experience. So that's essentially my template as an HR professional who has never done project management in my life. I'm looking at the job description and I'm just checking boxes. So if you can make sure your resume checks the same boxes, you're going to at least move on to the next stage.
Chandler, I'd love to hear from you. So you, as an HR professional, would work with a lot of hiring managers. Probably work if you're looking for at a project manager. There's probably a project somebody that's responsible for overseeing all of the project managers. What do they look for? So you, as the HR person, take the job description. You kind of use it as like a matrix or a rubric of some sort, and you'd be like, I'm checking these boxes. When you scale that up to the hiring managers, what do they look for?
For sure. So at the onset, as HR, and I think this is something that funnily enough gets misconstrued by general candidates, is that HR gets to make the final decision. No, we don't. We obviously help with the process, but we have no final decision making. What we do is we outline, again, the skill set of the people who have been shortlisted. So I would go to that hiring manager and say, these are the 5 best candidates based on the criteria that you have given me that fit. Now, what they do is they take those 5 candidates, they'll make sure that I am not out to lunch in terms of what I've brought to them, first of all, but then they will bring them in for an interview and make sure that they are a fit personally. That's what they ultimately are looking for because this person will report to them. They will have to work daily with them. They will have to have meetings with them and give them constructive criticism and all these kinds of things that deal with that personal touch. So what they're doing is trying to make sure that this person aligns with what the company's goals are, the culture, and that they're going to enjoy working with this person because we all work 8 hours a day, if not more. And that's a lot of time to be working with someone who frustrates the heck out of you. And
Yeah,
it's good to know someone's leadership style and all that kind of stuff for the candidate to learn, are they even a fit? So
yeah.
ultimately, that's what kind of the higher level hiring manager, a manager of the project managers is kind of looking for is that fit culturally, that fit personally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Chandler, the only time I've ever seen you out to lunch is actually out to lunch with employers. And so, Chandler, I am wondering, so you're talking to a lot of employers. What are they saying about hiring right now? What's the talent market like? What's the use of kind of artificial intelligence and AI and the tools along with that? What are some of the frustrations they're experiencing?
For sure. I think one thing, and I was reading this in a Business Insider article, is HR professionals reporting that they're seeing 3 times more resumes and applications than they did 3 or 4 years ago. It is just that much easier to apply to positions due to social media, due to things like the easy apply button on LinkedIn. And so these are things that are overloading their HR departments. And again, that's where the importance of making sure your resume and cover letter hit everything that they're looking for because they don't have the time. As much as AI is the next big thing, we're still figuring it out. We're still in the, early adopter stage. So we don't know how it's expertly installed into our HR departments. Yes, they're using it to sift through resumes, which is a thing that students and people out in the workforce looking for jobs should be aware of is again that keyword indicator. If it's not in your resume, they're not going to move you forward. And they have AI softwares that are sifting through and looking for these words that need to be identified for success in the role. So that's where AI is being used. Again, they're still developing and working on how to use it better, but that's kind of it in its infancy, tongue twister. But yeah, again, overload. There's a lot of candidates out there. The job market is a bit flooded at the moment, just due to people are uncertain about the economy. Organizations and companies aren't growing to the extent that they would like. Interest rates were high. All these accumulate to people aren't sure. And when they aren't sure, they're not willing to commit. And so that's why companies aren't posting and having as many opportunities, and the talent pool then begins to grow.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're hearing anecdotally when you're chatting with employers, so the managers of these roles? So I know you interact both with HR professionals kind of out there in industry, but talk to me about the actual people doing the hiring. What are you hearing from them?
For sure. So I had a conversation coffee the other day with one of the medium to larger finance companies, and they were talking about how people need to work on that personal side. Again, if you are technically sound and you make it through that first little screening test where you know Adobe or you know Python as a coding language. That's great. But do you understand the importance of being able to have a professional conversation at the workplace? Do you know how to send a professional email? Do you know how to respond adequately, sentence structure, being able to be put in front of clients? Like these are huge things that I think we are missing, especially when we're in such a digital world where right now we're sitting looking at you through screens. Like that's where we're at. And we're losing that personal touch of things. So project managers or hiring managers in general have been talking to me about that. That's kind of the biggest thing they keep hitting home, both for students and just general workforce, like that personal side. And you don't have to be a salesman. You don't have to be a talker who can go on for hours and be an expert. It's just, can you have a conversation about what happened? What's going on in the news? What happened in the sports event last weekend? Like these are just the simple things where people need to get more comfortable and accustomed to them.
That's something that Paul and I talk about a lot. And it's really nice to hear it confirmed for us and for students that, we say this, generally speaking, as long as you prove that you have an aptitude for learning technical things, employers are willing to train on all sorts of stuff. What it's really hard to train on is people skills. I like to call those power skills. Those truly are the power skills in our workforce, is your people skills. Emotional intelligence is just becoming so much more highlighted. Adaptability right now is really starting to come to the forefront in the rapid rate of change. And adaptability is a core skill set from a person perspective. That's not something you learn in a course. And so all of those pieces are stuff that employers are looking for to not have to train, because they're really hard to train on. So how do you prove that you have that?
For sure.
You talked about AI. We've touched on it. Give me your own sort of personal take on it. How are you using it? How are you seeing it kind of interplay? Just your own, where are you on this stage?
For sure. I am not the foremost user of AI. I don't use it daily, but when I do use it, what I generally use it for is structure. It's one of those things where you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So why not throw it into ChatGPT or some form of it to put together a structure of what you're looking to put together. At the end of the day, employers are getting more, not wary, but just aware of how much ChatGPT and AI softwares are getting used. So they're trying to discern what is actually what your words and what are the AI words. So what I use it for is building the structure and then making it my own. Okay. I myself, I would not say in an interview that my strong suit is writing. It takes me a while. I, again, use the things around me to help, but that is generally what I use AI to help me in my day-to-day. And again, as an HR professional, that would help me a lot if I was still recruiting and getting people on board.
Yeah. I think these tools, I love how you use the word structure. It really helps us build structure, and it can give us ideas. It can help us brainstorm, but we need to be the ones that iterate, right? We need to be, as the people, need to be the ones that deliver the content. And that content is really important. We could have shows upon shows all around artificial intelligence and what it does. But yeah, I very much appreciate the structure that can be helped through these things. What advice do you have for those tackling and updating their own resume and their own cover letters right now?
For sure. One thing is get a second opinion. You may know yourself best, but that doesn't mean your resume will know you best. So get a friend, a colleague, a coach to read over your resumes and cover letters as you edit them and update them. Also, continuously update them. One of those things where you could be at a company for 5, 10 years. You have no idea what you did in the first couple of years, especially as your job changes and things grow within you, making sure that it is updated regularly. Because again, no, you don't know when someone's going to ask for your resume as well. So making sure, one, you get a second opinion, two, you're updating it regularly so it is applicable. And then when it does come time that you are looking to apply, make sure it is specific to that company. One thing that Tiffany noted was, training. Organizations are willing to train and get you up to date. At the last company I was at Keller Construction, what we said was 90% of it is caring. You just have to care, right? 10% is the skills and the technical things that you already need to have at least in place to be successful. 90% is caring that we can coach. And that's where your resume and cover letter can come through, is if you can show you care about that particular role, that particular company, that'll help you stand out because people understand passion. People can, especially in the interview process, but we're talking about the cover letter here. If you can get across your passion for, whatever it is, you love Excel. There's some people out there, there's Excel competitions. That's crazy. But like, if you can talk about that, and that's an advantage to that role that you're applying for or something that is required, people will tell and understand that, hey, you really, really want this. You really, really care. And that'll help you go a long way versus everybody who's just throwing a resume out there under the sun, just being like, I hope I get this. That's the advice I would give.
Mm. I want to normalize for a second that, it sounds like the three of us kind of really know what we're talking, and we do, about resumes and cover letters, but sometimes we can make it sound easy in the way that we talk about it. I'm curious your own experience with your own resume, because I've got blind spots on mine. And especially, so we talk about HR and you and I being HR professionals. HR has its own language, just like every other industry, which means I can speak HR to anyone and forget that that type of language ends up on my resume. And if I'm not applying for an HR job, that's not the right place for it. So it's a bit of a blind spot that I have on my own. Tell me what it's like to work on your own Chandler's resume and cover letter.
For sure. So I think I have 3 or 4 different versions that I've worked on over the years, just because the way that, again, AI has disrupted the industry, the way that HR professionals are sifting through resumes at a breakneck speed, you need to make sure that it is customized for whatever role or whatever opportunity. If it is, hey, they need 2 pages of what I've done in the past, both technical and non-technical. Hey, maybe there's a company that really works on volunteering. You need to know these things ahead of time. And even for this role that I got at the School of Business, I had reached out to someone who had recently got a job at the U of A saying, what is the interview process like? What are they looking for? What helped you get that job? And I think that not enough people do that. Find your connections in your network that can give you that leg up on understanding the process a little bit more in depth. Because as much as we want our HR departments to be as transparent and communicative as possible in terms of what it will be, they're always going to be missing something. So to be able to go to someone within your circle to say, hey, how did this help you get that? That would be one of the biggest things for me that helped my resume when I was trying to get this job in particular. So leaning on those connections, building that network, you never know when that person who you talked with at that one event 5 years ago may help you out on LinkedIn when you send them a message. Generally speaking, people love to help. People love to give back. And especially if you have a cordial relationship with someone, it can go a long way. When it comes to the actual resume and cover letter, again, tips and tricks is keeping up to date on the most recent technology that's being used, theory that's being understood. If you are implementing change management, put that in your resume. Everybody loves change management nowadays, even in your cover letter. What are the things you love the most? Make sure that that is emphasized as long as it is related to the job. Don't put things that are unrelated. Yeah, you have lots of passions. You're your own person. That's awesome. Not everything needs to be communicated to that hiring manager.
Yeah, and spoiler alert for future episodes when we get to networking and interviewing. But I mean, the very first time I met Paul was when I reached out to him because of this role to see if I could get a bit more information on him. I did kind of the exact same thing. I happened to have access to the person who was, part of the hiring process. You yourself, just someone at the U of A, but can you do that? Can be hugely impactful to what application you put in. All right, let's do a little bit of pie in the sky. Resumes and cover letters have been around forever. Are they a bit antiquated? We could probably argue that. How do we think they're gonna change in maybe probably shorter term than we might think? But what do you think might happen to them?
Well, with the automation of everything, I think it's the even right now with the LinkedIn easy apply button where you just hit a button and your resume just goes out there. Like we all just might have business cards and you just tap it, and all your information will just show up on somebody's desktop, and that's all it really takes. I think that there's the benefit of a resume and cover letter, as much as it can be a lot to review and read through, there's that personal aspect of it that just can come through in droves. Like when you read something that is AI generated versus something that is written by a human being, you can tell the difference. And I think that's where people can stand out is making sure that your resume and cover letters sound like a person. They sound like you. And that means you can use AI for sure, but make sure at the end of the day, it is your words and having someone else read it ahead of time so that they know it's your words. I think that's important because as things move forward, technology is going to advance. Like I said, it's going to be the tap thing where just convenience beats everything else. Great, but how can you make that tap more personable, more enjoyable, make it, stand out?
Mm-hmm. And I will offer complimenting or perhaps a bit contradictory because I think all three of us have different ways of looking at these things, which I think is really great. In this case specifically, I think the skill set here is actually learning how to use AI so that it does sound like you. And I think when we spend enough time and truly learn how Gen AI works, I spend a lot of time in it. So I do use it daily. I use it for a lot of writing. I use it to write resumes and cover letters, but I do so, and it takes me the same amount of time. Let's be clear, it's not necessarily saving me time, it's changing my output in the same amount of time. And I think that's the skill set. And we're all viewing it as something to make it quicker and easier. And so if you switch that mindset to how can I actually learn how to use AI so that it truly does sound like a human, it's 100% possible. It takes a lot of time and effort, which is counterintuitive to why we're using AI.
For sure.
All right, Chandler, we have a lot of thoughts and opinions on this topic, but I think it's time to get to a lightning round, which I know you've been through once already. So we're going to revisit it. Are you ready?
Of course.
Cool. All right. And I'm going to compare this back to your first one and see if you say that. No, I'm kidding. See the same thing or not. Same thing, different thing. What has given your career the biggest boost?
The networks I've created, again, like I said, being able to reach out to people in different industries, areas that I can learn, but also grow and transition to new opportunities.
What's one thing you wish you'd learned sooner?
Not to be afraid of asking. People get really in their heads about asking. Just ask. The worst they can say is no.
Love it. Service, so important to Paul and I. So we're always curious to hear how service is going to show up for you this coming week.
For sure. Tonight, we're actually going over to a friends of ours' house. They just had a new baby boy about a month ago. And so we're going to be bringing them dinner and just kind of helping them out for the evening, wash dishes, do laundry, whatever it takes. So, as a soon-to-be father, I'm trying to give back as I can.
I was going to say, I hear you like putting out proactive karma, hoping that it comes back to you soon in the coming weeks. Very cool. All right, Paul's random question.
Okay, Chandler, I have no idea what I asked last time. So this question, there is a wrong answer, just in case you're wondering. Chandler, what font do you like to put onto a resume?
Oh, that's a good one. I I have four different versions, so I don't even know if I have the same font on all of them. I I don't know. I'm very basic. I'm a Arial or Times New Roman. Like it's nothing fancy. Like
Ooh.
yeah,
You just said one of the wrong answers,
which
Chandler.
one? I'll
That's
go change
the
it right now.
Times New Roman. It
No.
was made before I was born, that font. So, and I'm old as stink. So please do not use Times New Roman. If you take
I'll go
anything
change it
from
right
this
now.
podcast, yes, do not use Times New Roman.
We said that in class, and you could actually see students going and like going into the resume and like hitting change font. The other one, in case anybody is curious, Paul and I have two rules. One is no Times New Roman. The other one is at the start of your cover letter, do not start it with "I am keenly interested in applying for the role of blank." How many of us have heard that about 10,000 times from candidates?
Yeah.
You start it that way, so's every other cover letter. You can be a lot more creative than that. Those are our two big rules. So we saw students in the moment going and like instantly changing their stuff. So Chandler, thank you for the second time offering expertise, experience, diversity of thought and opinion, and really relevant positioning. You Talk to employers every single day, employers that are currently hiring students. And for us, in our audience, MBA students, you have a finger on the pulse, if you will, daily with what the industry is looking for. And that is just such important information for students. Thank you so much for sharing it, for being willing, and for just having you talked about passion. You have a passion very clearly for this work and for supporting students. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you guys for having me again. It was a pleasure. Hopefully this helps someone out there. At the end of the day, I'm just one guy. This is what I think, but that doesn't mean it's right. So take it with a grain of salt, but I do appreciate you guys for having me.
Cool. Awesome. And you're a great guy, Chandler. Thanks. All right, key takeaways. And I think both of us are going to point to things that we just haven't repeated over and over again. What are maybe some new or different key takeaways from this? And Chandler said this twice, and I was going to kind of highlight it, but the conversation didn't get back to it. But I've experienced it for sure. And I would think you would too, Paul. But lots of times people making parts of the hiring decision have never actually done that job. He talked about it. I've never swung a hammer, but I'm having to look at resumes and cover letters and try to decide who might be the best candidates for people who are going to swing hammers or insert any type of skill set or job. Yeah. That's happened a lot for me. I had a lot of technical roles, a lot of IT-based roles, plant-based, accounting. I've never done anything like that. And yes, as an HR professional, we have skills and experience, but don't forget that people looking at your resumes and cover letters haven't necessarily done the job. And so do you understand the audience that is going to be part of the hiring decision, and make sure that you're speaking to them too? It's a really big important and part of it that I think is sometimes missed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's really important. I look at two things he said. I look at the getting to know somebody in the organization to understand the hiring process and who could be responsible for looking at things. And then make it simple. Like, I for heaven's sakes, this doesn't need to be complicated. The more acronyms you put in, the more heavy words you put in, the more someone is gonna be like, I'm not spending time reading this. I don't even understand what it means, right? So I think definitely now a hiring manager may understand. So it's like walking that fine line. So I think that's really great. One thing he said, do you care? And the thing that comes to mind is, how do you convey that you care? I look at the way that students and job seekers apply for jobs. They look at it as transactional. But do you truly look at this organization and what would it be like to work there? And how do you describe that? If you're going to be doing jobs where you are going to be talking with different stakeholders, or if you're going to be using some of your great people skills, show that you care about these things. And that makes the job of ours reading those things just so much easier. And of the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of resumes we've seen, sometimes you just don't get that, do they care? And I think that really spoke to me. That really resonated with me.
It's a big, important part of the written brand that you're putting in front of somebody. A resume and a cover letter is part of your brand, and it creates a feeling. And if the only feeling I get from it is highly technical, to me, you're missing a part of it, even if it is a technical role. So I think that's really great. Next week, we continue on this journey of the tactical parts of career management. We are going to talk all things LinkedIn. So stay tuned for that. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Career Boosters podcast. We hope you had a blast. Yeah, we know that's corny. Catch you next time, and remember to subscribe wherever you enjoy podcasts.